Left. There we are. Good afternoon, everyone. Happy Friday. I hope everyone is having an amazing day. I am so excited because we have one of my favorite legislators on today. It's Representative Carlos Guillermo Smith. Representative Smith, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great today. How are you doing, Bernice?
I am even better now that I'm on with you.
It's great to be here, and I'm joining you from my Capitol office as well.
Nice. So I want to start by talking to you a little bit about, we're going to go way back in the past, and I'd love to hear from you. What's your first memory of politics? Like, what's your first political memory?
Well, I was elected. For those who don't know, my name is Carlos Guillermo Smith, and I represent Florida House District 49 in the Florida legislature. House District 49 is the East Orlando area of Orange County. So the neighborhoods I represent are UCF, Waterford Lakes, Rio Pinar, and Lake Pickett. And I was elected in 2016. But it was not always, like, running for office was not always what I wanted to do or what I could see myself doing. In fact, for many years, Bernice, I managed a Men's Warehouse store. For about 8 or 9 years, I managed a Men's Warehouse store. And then something changed when President Obama was elected in 2008. I was very inspired by his election. I was very much inspired by his progressive message and his progressive agenda, particularly around healthcare reform. And I couldn't figure out how I wanted to get involved as a manager of a Men's Warehouse store. So I got some really good advice from someone who was involved in politics already. And they said, Carlos, you should just volunteer for as many politically minded or civically engaged organizations as you can when you have time. And you're going to kind of learn, like, what you like about politics, the issues that you care about, and you'll also be able to start kind of familiarizing yourself with the community organizing and political space. So that's what I did. I became an intern for Equality Florida, for the Human Rights Campaign, and for OFA, which was Organizing for America. And I got really engaged on the healthcare reform package, particularly around pushing for a public option in the Affordable Care Act, which we didn't get. We're still fighting for to this day, the public option piece. But that was kind of when I was really woken up to the importance of politics and being engaged at the grassroots level. And that was kind of how it all started.
That's amazing. I was a fellow for OFA, so shout out to
There we
OFA.
go.
Amazing. And just curious about, what do you think are some ways that, like, your constituents could get more involved as well?
Well, really, I would pass along the same advice, for folks who are looking to get more engaged in the political process. Volunteering for organizations that advocate for the issues that you care about, I think, is really important. If you care about LGBTQ rights, you can volunteer for Equality Florida. If you care about making sure that the Hispanic and Latino community is represented in our community and represented in politics, you can get involved with the Alianza Center or Alianza for Progress, just as an example. If you really care about issues related to the environment and environmental justice, you can find out about volunteer opportunities with the Sierra Club, for example. There's just so many opportunities out there. And I think that if people get engaged in some of these politically minded and civically minded organizations, it will get them very involved in the community in a way that the organization will also direct you on what other things you can be doing with their organization to stay involved.
And I'm going to insert a shameless plug for Our Future. We are always looking for volunteers. So if you'd like to get involved, definitely reach out, connect with us. You can message us on Facebook. And we're always looking for folks to get involved and engage with the progressive work we're doing.
That's right.
So I'd love to talk to you about session. I know I can imagine you're in and out of meetings and having a crazy day. So thank you again for being with us today.
Of course.
But I'm curious about what was your feeling coming into session? I know it's still early, but you had committee weeks back in the fall. What was your thought? What were your thoughts like coming into session this year? Because you've been a legislator since 2016. So curious about, does this feel different than other years, or is it more of the same?
It does feel a bit different in this legislative session because we appear as a legislature to really just be doing everything possible to try to advance and enact Governor Ron DeSantis's agenda, which is really just an agenda that is meant to help him continue to pursue his political ambitions, which is not good for Florida. What I have always been focused on is making sure that we are advocating for issues that affect Floridians and really talking about the real needs of the people of our state. Let's take affordable housing as an example. We have an affordable housing crisis right now, which has been many years, if not many decades in the making, where folks just can't find an affordable place to live. And right now, folks are also seeing tremendous rent hikes that are totally unlike what they have seen before. Most folks are used to seeing year after year, let's say a 3 or a 5% rent hike. No one wants the rent hike, but a lot of times, if it's somewhere in that range, it's a rent hike that they can absorb. Now we're seeing folks that are facing 10, 20, 30% rent hikes, and it's just making Florida unaffordable for Floridians. That's why we called on Governor DeSantis to declare a state of emergency on housing affordability and use the consumer protections that exist in state law to protect us from price gouging, to protect renters who are seeing some of these unconscionable rent hikes across the state, which can keep families in their homes. Unfortunately, Bernice, issues like affordable housing or access to healthcare or property insurance or making sure that we're continuing to improve the quality of our public schools, these are not issues that are being actively considered by the legislature. Instead, the governor and Republicans are focused on things like the Stop Woke Act, which will essentially censor conversations about Black history and race in our public schools. You've heard about the Don't Say Gay bill, which will have a chilling effect on our ability to provide support and inclusive policies for LGBTQ students in our schools. And you also see some of these anti-environmental bills like the net metering bill that's going to stop our ability to expand rooftop solar in the state of Florida. These are just not, this is not good for Florida. And some of these bills are total distractions in addition to being dangerous. Distractions from the real issues that Floridians are facing.
So you talked a little bit about this, but I'm curious to hear, what do you think are the most dangerous bills that are coming out this session?
Well, I mentioned one of them just now, and I appreciate you asking that, Bernice. But this stop woke nonsense is extremely dangerous. Folks have heard about this effort in the legislature that has been framed by some as prohibiting CRT or critical race theory in our schools. First of all, critical race theory is not being taught in our public schools. So that message in and of itself is just, chasing problems that do not exist. But what's in the bill doesn't mention anything about critical race theory. It talks about how curriculum, as it relates to, different parts of Black history and civil rights history, that these issues cannot be presented in a way that make individuals feel discomfort or make them feel any sort of guilt when learning about our history. This is really just an attempt to whitewash the teaching of Black history in our schools, but it's also very dangerous and authoritarian. This is what I would see as conservative authoritarianism. We don't hear about censorship of important issues like history and race in public schools, except for in places like Cuba or other authoritarian regimes where conversations about history and race and other issues are controlled and censored by the government. So this is something that is very disturbing that a lot of folks should be paying attention to, because I think it does a disservice in part to the threat of this legislation and the seriousness of it, to just dismiss it as, oh, well, they're trying to ban critical race theory, which doesn't exist, so it's a distraction. Yes. However, the bill is actually dangerous because of the chilling effect it will have in discouraging schools, school districts, and teachers from having honest conversations about our history.
Yeah, and as somebody who does racial justice work and racial justice advocacy in the community, I can tell you that one of the most important steps for white people is to feel uncomfortable, right? Because growing is uncomfortable. That's why we have growing pains. So part of the process of unlearning racism that we've all been taught since we were younger is actually like feeling a little bit discomfort about what the reality has been for Black people in this country. So I think about that a lot when I think about this bill.
And thank you for sharing that, Bernice, because it is important for folks to hear that when kids are learning about the history of our country, that the history of our country began with slavery, when an entire race of individuals was separated from their families and sold.
Mm-hmm.
If that doesn't make you feel uncomfortable,
right,
then there's something wrong there. And the bill is not just about our schools. The bill intrudes on the ability of businesses and private corporations to have similar trainings, what we call diversity, equity, and inclusion trainings in corporate environments. And that is just totally unbelievable that we would censor private corporations in this way who are engaging in diversity, equity, and inclusion training for the sole purpose of making sure that managers, workers, staff, and employees are working in an environment that encourages every single person to be able to engage in professional growth without experiencing discrimination, without obstacles to their professional growth, while being sensitive to really, really important issues in the workplace, so that everyone has the opportunity to advance. These are important conversations that should be happening in the workplace. And the idea that they would be censored in this way, I think, is extremely alarming and dangerous.
Yeah, it's definitely harmful. And speaking of harmful bills, I wanted to ask you about a bill that, I personally just disgusted by, but the Don't Say Gay bill. I'm curious about how you, as an openly gay legislator, feel, because the legislature is right now trying to enact bills that dehumanize LGBTQ folks. So, how does it feel to be working in this environment?
Well, thank you for that question, Bernice. It doesn't feel good, I'll tell you that. This bill, House Bill 1557, also known as the Don't Say Gay bill, does a couple of things. It basically says that schools and school districts are not able to encourage conversations about sexual orientation or gender identity at all in K through 5. And it also says that anyone who believes that a conversation about sexual orientation or gender identity beyond K5, so in grades 6 through 12, if they believe that conversation to be not age appropriate, it empowers them to sue the school. Now, here's what I will say. While they're the minority, there are a number of individuals out there, homophobic, transphobic individuals, who don't believe any conversation about LGBTQ people is age appropriate. This legislation empowers them to sue the school whenever they think that is taking place, which is extremely dangerous and is certainly going to have a chilling effect on the willingness of school districts to have inclusive supporting policies of LGBTQ students. Now, as it relates to the K through 5 conversation, saying that these conversations cannot be encouraged by the school means that kids who have same-sex parents, for example,
Mm-hmm.
will not be able to, let's say, talk about their family. Let's say there's a third grader who, as part of a classroom project, everyone is asked, well, we want you to write an essay about your family, draw a picture of your family, and tell us what you do as a family together, what makes your family unique or different or special, and tell us about who your parents are. That would encourage a third grader who has two moms or two dads to basically talk about their LGBTQ family. And there's nothing age inappropriate about talking about who you are and what your family looks like, which
Right.
includes same sex parents and LGBTQ families, which, by the way, is not the same as a conversation about sex education.
Mm.
Conversations about the visibility and existence of LGBTQ people are not conversations about sex education. We already have laws in the books around age appropriate sex ed. That's not what this is. Conversations about LGBTQ people at any age, when it relates to just our existence as humans and as families, are not dangerous. This bill implies that they are dangerous and that there's something wrong with those conversations, which sends a terrible message to our youth.
Absolutely. And I want to ask you about just one more bill, which is HB 747, the medical bill. I know you spoke about this the other day, but just, for the viewers, would love to hear from you about this bill and once again, just how harmful it is.
That's right. Well, this legislation basically allows for a healthcare provider, a doctor, a healthcare worker, a pharmacy, even a health insurance company to deny service, healthcare services, or payment of healthcare services, claims, and medical bills if they have a moral or ethical objection. Now, I just want folks to understand we're also talking about insurance companies, okay? I
Mhm.
was not aware that insurance companies had any ethics or morals, first of all. Second of all, the idea, right, Bernice, that we would give insurance companies additional legal reasons to refuse to pay your medical bill because they have a moral or ethical objection to the health care that you are needing to receive is just ridiculous. And what does it mean as it relates to who is this impacting? Well, what is this targeted for? What's the point of this?
Right.
This is meant to give healthcare providers additional rights and opportunities to do things like refuse to provide contraception, to refuse to provide fertility services to, let's say, a lesbian couple or a single woman who's unmarried. It gives them the opportunity to, let's say, if a transgender person is admitted to a hospital, they've already transitioned, they're there for something unrelated. A healthcare provider, a nurse, or a doctor can have a moral or ethical objection to the fact that they're trans, and they can deny that person their therapy or their medication as a result of that objection. Even a person living with HIV. There are individuals who are out there who believe that a gay man living with HIV is God's punishment for being gay, and they may refuse to treat the person living with HIV if they find themselves in their care. I have major concerns about this legislation, which is why we opposed it in committee earlier this week. And it's something that I think folks should be speaking out about, reaching out to their legislators and telling them to vote no on House Bill 747.
Right. We got a question in the chat here, Carlos. Can you speak on House Bill 1197? So that one, I believe, is union busting.
Oh, yes. Oh,
Hmm.
yes. 1197. I'm actually very glad that I got this question. Thank you for that. So we heard this bill yesterday in committee, and basically House Bill 1197 is a union busting bill.
Hmm.
What it says is it prohibits teachers' unions and other public sector labor unions from being able to have their members deduct their union dues on their payroll, on their paycheck. So I'll give you an example. You know, most teachers actually pay their union dues on their paycheck. Every time they get their paycheck, the dues are automatically deducted from the check.
Right.
This bill cancels all of those automatic payroll deductions and prohibits these public sector employers, which include school districts who employ teachers who are members of unions, and other public sector workers from being able to collect them through payroll. They would then have to disenroll from the payroll deduction and go pay their union fees somewhere else, which could result in a loss of 10, 20, 30% revenue to some unions because of the administration problems that will create. Oh, but guess what? Here's the caveat, y'all. Guess who's exempt from this prohibition on payroll union dues deductions. Police unions
I figured. Yeah.
and firefighters and correctional officers, all predominantly male
Mm-hmm.
unions that represent predominantly male workers, as opposed to our teachers' unions, which represent predominantly female workers, predominantly women. And the purpose and the agenda here is obvious. It's a union busting bill, but it goes even farther than that to target unions that historically have been supportive of Democrats. And the quiet part was said out loud in committee yesterday when we heard the bill, when the bill sponsor one of the bill sponsors, Representative Cord Bird, said the quiet part out loud and basically said that they were concerned about the outside political activities of these unions, and that was a reason why they said that they were going to prohibit payroll dues deductions, which is it's appalling, and it's offensive that they would do this to our frontline heroes who have sacrificed
Mm-hmm.
so much during this pandemic. They made
Right.
arguments, Bernice, where they said, well, we're going to carve out the police, fire, and correctional officers because, those are public safety unions, and, they put themselves at risk every single day to keep us safe. And that message is, I'm not a teacher, but you don't have to be a teacher to be offended.
Mm-hmm.
Hear that some other union is going to be exempt from this onerous new requirement because they have sacrificed and because they have put themselves in harm's way. Teachers have put themselves in harm's way as well.
Yes.
They have gone into our classrooms while we have been in the middle of the pandemic. Many of them have contracted COVID. Many of them have died so that we can continue to keep our public schools open. And don't even get me started on how that message sounds to teachers and staff at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School, as
Right.
far as, these other unions put themselves in harm's way, and therefore we need to allow them to continue doing this. It's totally appalling.
Right. Yeah. Well, I want to shift gears a little bit because it feels to me, and this is like an outsider perspective, it gets worse every year. I don't know if that's the sense that you have, but it feels like it gets worse every year. But I want to shift to ending on a positive note. So I'm curious about what bills are you championing, or what bills are you excited about this legislative session?
Well, thank you for that, Bernice, because it's true. There's a lot of good work that is being done here in the Florida legislature that doesn't get enough attention. And, one of the priorities that I have had this legislative session is advocating for legislation to really raise the quality of care in our nursing homes. And here's why. We understand that there have been problems in Florida's nursing homes as it relates to the quality of care for a long time, but those problems were not only exposed, but exacerbated during the pandemic. And so what I've done is I've brought forward legislation that would finally hold nursing homes accountable to spend at least 75% of their revenue on patient care, and would also crack down on how they use taxpayer dollars on executive salaries, and also would kind of rein in some of these excessive staffing fees that we see through related party agencies, which means a nursing home that has a financial interest in a staffing agency that they own, and yet they use that staffing agency and charge exorbitant rates to pad their profits and protect their profits in a company that they also own, which is just kind of a wonky way of saying we're really raising the bar here. And by requiring a 75% of the revenue at a nursing home from Medicaid to be spent on patient care, we're incentivizing them to raise wages and raise benefits for the nurses and healthcare workers that work in our nursing homes. And that helps address the nursing shortage and the nursing crisis. Because one of the main reasons why so many nurses are leaving the profession is because of low wages and low benefits. So I think that this is a really, really good initiative. And we also are going to be strongly advocating for people with disabilities this session, as we have been. You know, there's some really long waiting lists in the state of Florida for people who are developmentally disabled to be able to get access to personal supports and care. We're also making progress with raising the wages for direct support individuals. Those are folks that work with people with disabilities to help them live and work in their communities. So I'm really, really excited about that. You're on mute, Bernice.
Typical. I was worried my dog would start barking, so I kept muting myself. Work from home problems, right? Well, Representative Smith, thank you so much for being on with us today. We appreciate you taking the time. And do you have any last words that you want to leave folks with?
Sure. Well, thank you, Bernice, again. And thank you to For Our Future for having me for a part of this discussion. I really want folks to understand that we have people power. And the best thing that we can do to make sure that our voices are represented in the process is do things like volunteer for organizations like For Our Future, organizations like Equality Florida, Sierra Club, and others that are getting people involved in the legislative process. And if there's a bill that you see that you are opposed to or that you support and you want to reach out, go to myfloridahouse.gov, go to floridasenate.gov, and reach out to your state senator, identify your state representative, and send them a message or request a meeting and get engaged so that you can make sure that your voice is heard in this process. But I also want folks to stay in touch with me too. We're very engaged on social media and talk to people a lot through our social media platforms as well. So if you haven't already, please follow me at on Twitter and Instagram at Carlos G. Smith. That's on Twitter and Instagram at Carlos G. Smith, or on Facebook as well, Representative Carlos Guillermo Smith.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much again, Representative Smith. And I hope everyone has an amazing Friday and a wonderful weekend. Thanks for joining, y'all. We'll see you next week with Representative Ana Escamani.
Yes. Thank you, Bernice.
I love it. I need one of those.
Thank you all. Take care.